balance is you don't want people to just fall into that and by default like screw themselves over. But if you're not paying attention, you can totally put points into places that aren't useful. But I think the opposite side of that you probably discovered during testing, and you have to decide what you're going to leave in and not, is that people can find these really, really powerful combinations of stats that the designers didn't even imagine were going to be possible.
Well, Steve, if you think about somebody like Blizzard does, is they do their builds, right, and then they patch it for over years and years and years, trying to make it better and better. Now, ours is a much simpler problem, but I don't know if we ever patched, builds, for instance, in this. Like, we basically had one shot at it, and Dorian Hart did most of um, the balance work and the numbers work, and he just had to get it right, get it as right as he could the first time. And I think, given that constraint set, he did a real amazing job at getting it as right as it was. But you know, that's a super hard problem, because also as the game goes on and you're later in the game, your ability to test late stage states is more limited than your ability to test the game at the beginning. So you have, not only is the game later and it's harder to get to those places and test later, but you also have a much higher the delta between various builds is much higher at that point. So it's like it's a compounded problem.
Yeah, and there's totally stuff that you can kind of predict just through like running the numbers in a spreadsheet, but that still doesn't tell you the final player experience, which,
Yep.
yeah, you just got to cross your fingers.
Well, and because the player experience in our minds was about authoring an experience and discovery as you're moving through this world, it takes some of the burden off of the stats and character growth to be spot on and balanced. If you're playing a PvP game or an MMO, you worry a lot more about balance to make it fair for everybody. Fairness here didn't really matter, and so we had some slack on that end of things.
Well, we're at a half hour mark, so I just want to let our audience know that may have just been joining us. What you're watching right now is the classic 1999 PC game System Shock 2, and we are playing it with OtherSide Games, which is comprised of many people who not only worked on this game, but on the Ultimate Underworld series, and this is all to bring attention to the Underworld Ascendant Kickstarter. This is it's an attempt to bring back the very classic open-world play-as-you-choose game that was Ultima Underworld. The new game will be Underworld Ascendant. If you're looking at the crawl on the bottom of the screen, those are the places you can go to donate money to help make this game become a reality. We are joined by Paul Neurath, who's the founder at OtherSide Games and also worked at Looking Glass Studios on System Shock 2. We are also joined by Ken Levine, who is one of the co-founders of Irrational Games that also helped make System Shock 2. Steve Grainer, who is best known for Gone Home, as at the Fulbright Company, but has worked with Irrational and seems to play System Shock 2 on a daily basis, from things that I've heard. Paul, is there anyone else who's been joining us now that should be introduced?
Stephen Kick, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
So Stephen can introduce himself, I believe.
Yeah, so my name's Stephen Kick. Hi, Steve. Hi, Ken. Hi, Paul.
Hey.
Hi, Adam. I'm the CEO of Night Dive Studios, and we are responsible for basically figuring out the legal craziness that's gone on with System Shock 2 and re-releasing the game on Steam.
Well, thank you for that. For those of you out there, yes, the game is available on Steam, and I think it's definitely found a classic audience. I think something of a new audience as well. Did you just work on getting the rights for the game, or I would have to assume that there was a fair amount of technical work necessary so that the game could play on contemporary systems?
It's kind of an interesting story. Basically, after our phone call with Star Insurance Company, who currently owns the rights to the games, I was putting together a team of engineers to start solving the technical issues and stuff that were currently going on with System Shock. And I distinctly remember going on my computer and checking out Kotaku, I believe, and seeing that there was an article about System Shock 2 that had just popped up. And it was about a modder in France who had kind of anonymously released an update to the game that allowed it to run on modern operating systems. And I thought that was a really, really strange coincidence. So we attempted to reach out to him, but had no luck. For whatever reason, he wishes to stay anonymous. But with his patch and with some help from the System Shock 2 community, ss2.org, we were able to get the game up and running.
Why System Shock 2? I mean, obviously it's held in extremely high regard these days, but it probably wasn't as grand a seller as even, I think, the original Thief game or other ones out there. I'm curious what brought you to this game in particular.
I've got really, really fond memories of this game. Playing it, this is going to date me, but I was in middle school when the game came out. And
I went out of college, so don't worry.
And my friends and I, we were all big PC nerds, and I was raving to them about how much I loved Half-Life. And one of my friends said, "Have you ever played System Shock 2?" I said, "I haven't even heard of it." And so we brought it in the next day, and I remember seeing the box, like the foil cover with Shodan, looking right at you, and just instantly having this idea of what to expect. And I went home that night, played it, and pretty much ever since that moment, I had been inspired to become a game designer. And it's just one of those games. I don't feel like it's aged that much for how old it is. It's withstood the test of time, and it's just a fantastic game.
Can I jump in? One of the I'm gonna co-MC with you just a little bit, Adam. Sarah from OtherSide is in the internal chat we have over here. She's telling us that that OtherSide has 10 Steam codes for System Shock 2 to give away during this stream, and they're going to give away those kind of over the course of the stream to people who are in chat. And they've actually picked the first 2 winners in the Twitch chat already. So the first 2 winners of free Steam codes for System Shock 2 are users Drearier Spider and Nimril. So you guys that are in the chat just want a couple codes for System Shock 2 on Steam, and there's going to be more coming up as we keep streaming and playing.
And those are courtesy of Night Dive Studios. Thank you, Night Dive.
Oh, awesome!
You're very welcome.
Very much, Stephen. So, on that sense of memories, I'm curious, Paul and Ken in particular. I mean, I know it's like when I go back and I see old work I used to do, that what probably is sort of whatever to anyone else. I know so much about what was probably in my head or happening in my life at that time. Is watching this playthrough of System Shock 2? I mean, is it bringing back any kind of strong memories, either of the developing experience or or just kind of what your thoughts and expectations were for the game when it finally reached the mass market?
Well, one thing it brings back for me is that a lot of the development, not unusual for game studios, was done late at night in darkness, and reflecting the environment of this game, dark and dim.
Yeah, I mean, the Irrational team was in one room at Looking Glass, and sort of people were helping us. It's great Church and Eric Brosius from the Looking Glass side, who were in different rooms working on different products, but we were there always pretty late, and listening, in a very dark room that was probably, I don't know, what, 100, 200 square feet, maybe 300 square, I don't know. It was not a big room.
And Ken, as I recall, there was Shodan written in blood dripping from one wall.
That was my blood, actually.
You do have to sacrifice to make these kinds of games.
But I think that was kind of critical, the feeling of late night. Like the memories, I was obsessed with this album by Betty Severe at the time, and I remember I would listen to that album over and over again. And just being in that dark room, I think partly, it's sort of, I think I associate that room with this game. I don't mean just this game, but when I sort of remember the visual of the room, I sort of feel it's a similar memory to the visual of the game, because the lights were never on, really, and it was always coming from some light was always coming from some. The shades were always drawn, and some light was coming from some monitors usually, and that's sort of looked like this space with fewer monkeys.
I think also highlights something that we haven't discussed yet, but this is, I think, one of the strongest memories most people have of System Shock 2. It was extraordinarily scary and tense. That it doesn't even sort of build up after maybe several hours and you're starting to get the chills. I mean, I would say about 30 minutes in, you're starting to dread what's coming around every corner. And I didn't know. Obviously, your intention was to have a horror-themed game, and there were survival horror elements. But is that once again something that you can anticipate? Because when you're working on the game day in day out, I don't know if you guys can actually gauge the sense of dread and menace and malevolence that just permeates this entire experience.
Yeah, it's interesting that we I don't think we had the full impact of how scary this game was ourselves in developing it. It wasn't until fans, playing it started to write us, letters or emails saying that they literally couldn't play it at nighttime. It's too scary for them. That we knew we'd hit a certain chord there. That made us quite satisfied.
You can try to make it scary. There's some intellectual rules you make for yourself, like you limit resources, so the player tends to be very nervous about using any resource. You die very quickly in this game, like you don't have a zillion hit points. Something I learned from System Shock 1 is hearing an enemy walk around in the distance, and I wish I could imitate some of the cyborgs in System Shock 1, but you sort of hear the kind of sound effect, but not knowing where they were always scared the hell out of me. And so, we try to basically take these sort of rules that we understood intellectually that we thought would make scariness, but we didn't. There's no way, as Paul says, there's no way to know until you give it to somebody who's not us, because it's not going to scare us, because we saw it from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that the thing that you can't anticipate fully, because you get so used to being inside the game as you're developing it, but it's all new to players, and I think so much of that happens in the player's head, because we had similar messages from people who played Gone Home, and Gone Home doesn't have any enemies in it. There's nothing that's going to kill you, but people are just like, that dark house, it was just so spooky. I didn't want to go in the next room. It's too scary for me. And I'm like, it's just a house. But, people, they see the atmosphere, and sort of they fill in the gaps with their imagination. I think that's what scares people as much as, let's say, a psionic monkey jumping up from around the corner,
I think another interesting aspect, going back to one of the grand themes sort of what's happening with System Shock 2, and was obviously in Underworld and will be in Underworld Ascended, which is something we should get to soon, Paul. But you're making all these decisions that are pretty much designed to help assist you survive this circumstance. And every encounter is like almost sort of passing judgment on the wisdom and the efficacy of all those decisions that you made. That, if not even only on an intellectual level, it's like I remember that being also this moment sort of tension, because even if I could get through that encounter, it kind of gave me a sense of what was going to happen going forward if I really even had a sense of survival here.
Well, it is a very challenging game, but those challenges and that sense of, can I survive the next minute, the next 5 minutes, ultimately becomes very satisfying when you can, and you learn a lot. It's like any challenge, you fail a lot and you learn a lot, and we let the player fail a lot. We let the player die a lot, and they figure things out over time. And if they look back after they played the game for 16 hours, there's a real sense of satisfaction in saying, I'm so much more capable of surviving this environment that's trying to kill me in every which way. The satisfaction is much greater because you have, as opposed to, more common in modern games is to kind of coddle the player more or less, make it really hard to actually get into trouble. And that can take away from that satisfaction. The game that has training wheels, and it's just not as satisfying to win at something when there's training wheels on it.
That's something where I think that. Oh, sorry. I was going to expand on, or follow on that a little bit. I feel like Paul and Tim, especially your perspective on this, must be really fascinating as designers, because you guys were at the very beginning, I feel like, of establishing what this subgenre is, and then in the interim, there have been all these games that have continued to expand on it and kind of change player expectations. Deus Ex and BioShock and Dishonored and BioShock Infinite. And now you guys are kind of going back all the way to the beginning in a way, and I assume that you're having to find a balance between taking those kinds of lessons learned and developments that have happened in the intervening 20-something years and staying true to the roots of what the game is. Are you guys finding that to be an interesting thing to have to try to juggle?
Yes. It's one of the reasons we're doing this. What's kind of amazing to me is that people still play games like Ultima Underworld, which 22 plus years ago came out, and really enjoy it. The graphics may be incredibly primitive, but the gameplay and the experience